well, thank you so much for joining me today. So this video is going to be an in-depth book review of The Shattered King by Charlie Ann Holmberg. This is my first video review that is kind of like more in-depth, so I'm very grateful for you joining me for it. Some information about the book. So it's called The Shattered King by Charlie Ann Holmberg. It's young adult fantasy and 333 pages. And it is a book in a series, but the first book hasn't come out yet as it's an arc, so you can't like binge the series if you are after that. And I'd say that the book started off really well for me and I was enjoying it. There were some kind of strange bits that I'll kind of get into that I wasn't sure about at first. And then by 3/4 of the way through the book, I just wanted it to be over, to be honest. And for a star rating, I say it was about a 3-star. And this is an ARC, so like an advanced reading copy, so I received a free ebook of this book from Netgalley and from the publisher 47 North, so I just want to thank them for that. So a bit more in-depth information about the book and kind of what I guess it is. So it's about Nim, and she's a craft healer, and it's kind of like a medieval-esque fantasy town. There's a few different types of magic, but healing is the only one that has been allowed in this world, and the prince of that world is very sick, so his family drafts healers to try to see if one of them can heal him. So Nim lives in like a small village with her family. She has a lot of siblings, her parents aren't around, and they're like just scraping by. And her brother, because there's war and like lots of politics, he gets conscripted and he has to go fight in like the actual army. And then basically right after, Nim gets conscripted and has to go to the capital to try to heal the prince, which she's not very happy about because she has like her siblings to look after, and like the 2 older siblings have just gone. Nim originally plans to kind of try to get out of healing, but then she manages to fix something, so they make her stay basically, and she does not have a good time. She's not treated very well, both in like working hours, I guess, and like she has no respect. She doesn't even get like new clothes, and it's just a really bad time, and she's absolutely burning out. And the princess' illness is also a lot more complicated than she's ever seen, so the magic I will go into, but it's a very visual magic, so she can basically go into like a loomis and see that the prince had like a glass loomis and it's all broken, and she's trying to kind of piece everything together, and then by her piecing together the bits of the loomis, he then gets healed. With that, she's trying to get him healed to a point so she can go back home, but there are a lot of difficulties with that because kind of what she fixes doesn't necessarily stick. And there's also, like I said earlier, war on the horizon. There's a lot of politicking going around, and she's also kind of falling for the prince, even though she's absolutely said absolutely not. So that creates a lot of different bits of tension in the book, which did keep me pretty gripped for the first 2/3. Who would I recommend this book to? The main characters are in the early 20s, but it is a young adult novel, so they often feel a lot younger than they are. I think for the prince, it would make sense for him to feel a lot younger, but for Nim, it doesn't, just because she had to grow up really quickly, and a lot of the things that she does are very immature, and this just created awkward times in the book that weren't like cute awkward, they were just awkward. I'm starting to kind of touch on the magic system, and I'm still not 100% sure if it works for me, but it did have a lot of interesting bits to it. And I'd say if you like a lot of visual descriptions without those descriptions slowing the story down, then this could definitely be a good read for you. I'd say part of the issues that I had at the 3/4 mark were that there were a lot of inconsistencies arising. So if you go into the book, be aware that that might happen for you as well. And then if you just enjoy a quick fantasy read where there's interesting aspects, I think this could be a really good read. I'm hoping that they can do some editing on the last quarter of the book, just because it hasn't been released yet, just to kind of make things flow a lot better. and make more sense for the characters. This is going to be my favorite segment, I think, of these reviews. They're definitely my favorite to write. So for this section, I'm going to be looking at the book as an unpublished author. I would absolutely love to be published someday, so when I read a book, I try to be a lot more critical in terms of what I liked about a book, what I didn't, what I think was working, what wasn't, and also why, because that can sometimes, when I read a book, I'm like, oh, I didn't like it, but then I'm like, but why didn't I like it? So I'm just trying to be more aware. I've been doing this for a few years and it has been really helpful to me, and I hope it helps you as well if you're also an aspiring author or you're just curious and want to do some more like deep reading of books. The magic system was very interesting, and at first I didn't like it. I found it quite jarring, but as I kept reading, there are some positives to it. I'm still not 100% sure where I stand on it, but I will say I've never read any magic system like it, so that was a very kind of cool read because of that. So essentially everybody has a Loomis, and craftlock healers can touch somebody, enter their Loomis, and the Loomisi can basically are unique to each individual, and it's a setting essentially. So it could be a castle, it could be a pond, it could be glass everywhere, it could be animals in cages, and to heal somebody, the healer has to identify what's wrong with the person's Loomis and fix it, and by doing that they can heal the person. And this can be done by rearranging bricks or attaching broken things in the Loomis. And I would say that the magic system feels completely disconnected from the magic that it's doing. So in all stories, especially fantasy, the reader has to suspend belief to feel immersed in the world. And I felt like this magic system kind of asks too much of the reader for it to be believable. So I would say that if you like reading descriptions, this could be really good. Everything was described very visually, very viscerally, because Nim would go in and like start moving stuff around. In that way it was a lot easier to understand than maybe other kind of medical or healer people kind of going and touching somebody and then in your mind just kind of fixing a broken bone. They've moved a brick and now their ankle's not sprained, like that kind of thing. So in that way there's a very obvious cause and effect. I think the cause and effect don't quite link up enough for me, but it was a very interesting read anyway, just because new magic system. I touched on it, so that 3/4 of the way through the book lost it for me, and a lot of that is because the characters didn't seem like they were following through on actions that they should have been, or at least actions that were believable to them even though it was a fantasy world. So the two main characters in this book, so there's Nim, who's the healer, and Ren, who's the prince that she's trying to heal, are older characters for many fantasy books, so they're 24 and 20. However, in a lot of ways they feel as really immature books and feel like they should be in the YA sphere, because it is a YA book with older characters, and I'm not sure if that quite worked well enough. I don't read a lot of YA anymore, but yeah, I think there was a disconnect there, because I was like, she's 20, they're 24, what are they doing? I'd say that Ren makes more sense to be kind of more immature than Nim does, because he has been ill for his entire life. He's kind of been pampered, and he's a prince and he comes from privilege, and Nim very much doesn't. She's had to work really hard, she's responsible for all of her siblings and like the finances and beekeeping and all kinds of stuff. I did generally like both of the characters, and Nim was very compassionate, which I enjoy, because sometimes in fantasy books it can be quite cold like the main female characters, which I don't hate. It was just nice to see somebody nice. So at that 3/4 point, it feels like the book just shifts and the quality drops for me. I felt like in the first bit the pacing was driving forward quite a bit and I was invested, even though I was sure about the magic system. However, as I got to the end, there were just so many inconsistencies popping up. So with the characters' actions, with things that were kind of said earlier in the story that then didn't make sense as we got on. There was a lot of action, even though the pacing for me slowed down, but there were things that were happening that just felt too convenient for the plot, and I didn't like that. It just didn't make sense. I think the pacing did get a bit muddy at the end, but I'm not sure if that's just because I just kept being pulled out. I'm not sure if that counts for pacing. Pacing is something that I'm working on improving on, working on recognizing, because I can feel it, but sometimes I have a difficult time properly honing in on what it is that is making something pace well. So I am working on being able to identify that better. I haven't quite narrowed down on why I think the pacing for this slowed down for me, other than those inconsistencies and bringing me out of the story, but it just fell off for me. And I feel like a lot of things that I've kind of noted in this review have been negative things, but for a lot of the book I did really enjoy it, and I wanted to keep reading. I wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to read more about the characters, which is kind of that last part of the book that made it a bit less enjoyable. I do think if you are an aspiring fantasy author, it might be a good read, especially with looking at how to create those unique magic systems, and I think reading a lot of different books by different authors can be really good, and even some books by the same authors. Like, I have read a lot of Charlie Ann Holmberg before, and I generally love her writing. Like, the Paper Magician series is one of my favorite series, so I think I was extra disappointed in this book, to be honest. But yeah, I do think that having a breadth of books read is helpful for kind of learning where you want to kind of move your writing toward and what things you want to incorporate, and just being able to recognize what might be working, what might not be working. That is my review. Thank you so much for joining me for it. I hope it was interesting, and hope not too harsh, because I didn't really want it to come across that way. I was just kind of picking out things that interest in me, I guess. Let me know if you think you're gonna pick this book up. I am very curious to hear your opinion on it, because I haven't really seen anybody else talking about it, probably because it hasn't been published, which is fair enough. I hope your reading is going well, and I will see you in the next one.